Okay, great. You can hear me. All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the info session for Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp. My name is Mark Davis. I'm on the leadership team here at Fullstack, and I run Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp. Excuse me, if you want to get a hold of me, sorry, 1 second. If you want to get a hold of me after the talk, then you can find me on Twitter at Digitize My Life. So what we're going to talk about today is I want to give you a quick introduction to Fullstack Academy, give you an introduction to Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp. Specifically, I want to give you talk about the big picture, what's happening in cyberspace, talk about why this is creating such a huge opportunity for people going into this field, give you a quick overview of the program, and then we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into the actual curriculum. Then we're going to talk about next steps if you want to continue exploring going into this bootcamp, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So don't worry about taking notes. We're going to email you this slide deck tomorrow at the email you used to register for this event. Okay, so before we get started, so if any of you are already considering a career in cybersecurity, then at this point you probably have more questions than answers, right? So where would I start? What would I need to learn? How hard would it be to learn that stuff? Would I like the actual day-to-day work? What would my career path look like? And how much money would I make? That's obviously an important question as well. So we're going to be answering these questions and some more as we go through the talk. So quick introduction to Fullstack Academy. So we were born in an accelerator in 2013, if you've heard of Y Combinator, YC. Some other companies that were born in YC are Dropbox, Airbnb, and some other organizations that you've probably heard of. We've got campuses in New York City, Chicago, and online. Actually, I should update this because we also have one in California now and one in Florida as well. But we're headquartered here in New York. You can probably see behind me here in New York City. We're actually the top ranked coding bootcamp in the United States. Now, obviously here, we're here to talk about today, cyber, not coding. But we began as a cyber bootcamp, and we're actually the top ranked in the US. So if you Google us and you look at our reviews, you'll see we average 4.9 out of 5 stars on the main rating sites. And we're really proud of those. We work hard for those reviews every day. So one thing we like to say here is that we're a little bit crazy about outcomes. Outcomes is jargon in our world for getting hired after you finish the program. So if you look at where our graduates work across coding, for example, this is some of the organizations: Facebook, Google, American Express, and some others. Actually, Amex isn't even on here. What's interesting about this list is that a number of these companies, Google, for example, have hired more than 25 of our grads. So typically what they see is the high caliber of students coming out of Fullstack, and then they keep on hiring our grads. So just a quick bit of history. In 2013, we launched our first cohort of the coding bootcamp. In 2016, we launched something called the Grace Hopper program, which is the first all-female coding bootcamp in New York City, and the first in the country to offer a deferred tuition model. And then last year, we partnered with New York City to build and launch Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp, the official cybersecurity bootcamp of New York City, which of course we're talking about today. So let's talk about Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp, okay? And let's first talk about the big picture, and then we'll zoom into the details. So, and as I sort of talk through the big picture here, I'm going to put 3 slides up, and I'm just going to read through them because I think that's the quickest way to sort of set the stage for the story we're going to be telling in this talk. So, it's pretty bad out there. You read it in the news every day, another huge hack or data breach. The fact is, there's a war being waged in cyberspace right now, and the white hats are losing to the black hats, as we say in InfoSec. And this is happening on a massive scale, as cybercrime will cost the world $6 trillion annually by next year. We need more white hats. Companies and governments are struggling to keep pace with the dramatic rise in cybercrime. They're trying to hire people with cyber skills, but there is a critical shortage of them in the US and around the world. there will be 3.5 million cybersecurity jobs open by 2021. That's a statistic according to Cybersecurity Ventures. Help make a difference. So what does this mean to you? That there's an opportunity to get on the cyber battlefield as a white hat hacker and really make a difference. So that's the big picture, okay, what's happening in the world in the United States. Now, why is this creating a huge opportunity for people entering the space? Well, it's all about supply and demand, right? Basic economics. So let me throw some numbers out there. So right now, there's 3 million open cyber jobs. And this is a big number. I don't know of any other industry that has so many open jobs. And you can see roughly where they're distributed in terms of the part of the world. Now, as we just saw, that number is going to grow to 3.5 million by next year. And because of this, because there's such an oversupply of demand and an undersupply, there's more supply than demand. That means the entry-level price for cybersecurity talent is relatively high. So according to CyberSeek, which is cyberseek.org, which is a nonprofit that aggregates data in the cybersecurity world, the average salary for an entry-level security analyst here in New York City is $85,000 entry level. So not only is the entry-level salary relatively high, but there's a typical career progression where you can see your salary going up over time. So obviously everybody's journey is different, but to give you an example journey, if you start in year 1 as a cybersecurity analyst, year 2, become what's called a penetration tester, and we'll describe what this means later. 102K, these are average salaries from CyberSeek. And then let's say you move up to become a cybersecurity engineer, 108K, and then a cybersecurity architect, 129K. And what's interesting about these numbers is that when I show them to people who do not work in InfoSec, they would typically say, oh, those look relatively high. But when I show them to people who do work in InfoSec, especially these sort of later year numbers, they say these numbers feel low because it's not uncommon for people to make considerably more than this as technical talent in cyber, $200,000 per year plus. In fact, cybersecurity professionals have an average salary that's 3 times higher than the national average. And the demand for cybersecurity experts is growing 12 times faster than the current US job market, making cybersecurity one of the most highly sought after careers in the country. But first you need to train grasshopper, okay? And an obvious question, if you say, okay, if you get to a point where you say, all right, I am interested in going to cybersecurity, then an obvious question I hear a lot is, how long will it take to get the required skills? And it depends, right? There are a number of different ways to train for cybersecurity skills. So, for example, you could do an undergraduate degree in cybersecurity if you don't already have your undergraduate degree, and that'll take you about 4 years. Maybe you already have your undergraduate degree and you want to do a master's in cyber. That'd take you about 2 years. You could try and self-study. People do it. It's not easy. It could take 12 to 18, 24 months to do that. Or you can look at doing sort of accelerating your training and doing a cybersecurity boot camp. If you're doing it part-time, it's typically going to take you about 6 months. If you do it full-time, it's going to take you about 3 months. So this world of cybersecurity boot camps, it's new, it's emerging. There are not that many cybersecurity boot camps across the United States, but they are increasing in number, and you're seeing a lot more graduates starting to come out of them. So let's give a quick overview of the program at Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp. So the mission is we teach motivated students deep foundational skills that are in high demand from employers in New York City and around the world. When our students graduate, we help them land their first job and begin a fast-growing career in cybersecurity where they love what they do every day and feel good about doing something positive for the world. And this last part, feel good about doing something positive for the world, is a really important part of the equation here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the talk. So if you look at sort of the basic concept of what we're doing at the bootcamp, is you can go from beginner to employable cybersecurity professional in 17 weeks. So you start out by taking an introductory course called Hacking 101, which is free, it's online, you get started immediately, where you learn what it's really like to work in cybersecurity, and if this may be a good career path for you. If so, you continue and into Foundations, right? And so Foundations is a 4-week program where you do some pre-work to get ready to go into the boot camp. The boot camp is 13 weeks. It's here on campus in New York City. And then when you graduate from the boot camp, you do what's called flight. And that's the period after you graduate from the boot camp where you're splitting your time about 50-50. On the one hand, doing your job search, and on the other hand, doing continuous learning, going deeper into the cybersecurity topics that you started learning in the boot camp, with the goal, begin with an ending in mind, right? The goal being to get hired, obviously. That's why you would come to a boot camp like this, as specifically either a security analyst or a penetration tester. And again, we'll describe what these mean later. In fact, let's start getting into that, and let's go into the curriculum. So to do that, I'm going to show you something called a course poster. So in InfoSec, course posters are common, okay? And basically course posters, you can think of it as like a poster-sized infographic, which visually paints a picture of the student journey going through the course, through the program, talks about what you're going to learn, why you're going to learn it, the sequence that you're going to learn it in, and what are sort of the expected outcomes when you graduate from the class. So what I want to do is walk you through the course poster for Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp. And so you're seeing it here where, you won't be able to read the text here, but don't worry, I'm going to zoom into each section and I'm going to walk you through the student journey. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, hopefully everybody is still hearing and seeing me okay. If not, just go ahead and post in chat. Okay, so the course poster, this is essentially the student journey. We're going to walk you through in detail this way, and then week by week through the program, what you're going to be learning, and then we're going to talk about the target outcomes when you finish the program. So let's go ahead and start in the top left-hand corner. So first, you start out with Hacking 101, as I described earlier. Free 6-hour online course, and really what we're trying to do with Hacking 101 is not only paint a picture in terms of like the course poster, and the journey, what it can look like to go into this field, but also hopefully to capture your imagination in terms of why this field is so important and why it can be such a great career path. If when you finish Hacking 101, this field has piqued your interest, then you would apply and take an admissions exam. Now, I often get asked, are there any prerequisite skills I need to get into the boot camp? Do I need to study for the boot camp? And the answer is no, not really. What we are doing, there's not a textbook you can do that you can study to read for the exam. It's really like sort of math brain teasers. We want to see, we're testing for logical reasoning and the ability to solve puzzles. So no specific technical skills are required. So let me give you an example of what you would expect to see on the exam. So we'll go through 2 problems here. Consider these numbers. And you see a set of numbers here. Which does not belong? And so you may look at that and say, oh, okay, they're all even. So 17, that does not belong. So that one is relatively easy. Here's another problem. If dad equals 18, fish equals 84, and feed equals 40, what is the value of beach? Now, this one may not immediately leap out at you, but if you spend a minute or two thinking about it, then you may be able to figure it out. What's happening here with this problem and try and come up with a solution. So these are the types of math brain teasers that are on the admissions exam. Now, if you pass the admissions exam, we'll invite you in for an interview. And then as you get through that process, if you get accepted into the program, then before you start, we'll ask you to sign our ethical code of conduct. We call it the White Hat Manifesto. And this is actually something really important to us. We'll talk about it more later in the talk. But it's basically because of the nature of what we're teaching here. We're teaching offensive and defensive security, but the offensive security skills that we teach can be used for nefarious purposes, right? And so we just want to make sure that we're admitting students that are committed to being white hats and not black hats. And that's why we ask them to sign our ethical code of conduct. We'll look at that in a little bit. Okay, so let's zoom back out here. And you can see the weeks 1 through 4 leading up to getting into the boot camp is foundations, like I talked about before. So what you're doing here during foundations is learning basic security and networking concepts, how to work in the command line. So some of you may have never worked in the command line. Probably most of our students haven't worked in the command line before they come into the program. And the basics of Python. Now, foundations is a part-time online course, right? So it's 25 hours per week for 4 weeks that you take at home. And then once you pass foundations, you'll be ready to start the boot camp. So we want to make sure everybody has a base level of knowledge before coming into the boot camp, which moves at a pretty rapid pace. So in terms of the specifics, computing and networking basics, so you're learning something called the OSI model, which is a networking concept, which is really important in cybersecurity, and also basic components of a computer operating system like the kernel and how it differs from the operating system, how computers talk to each other, again, through the OSI model. Then we'll get into security basics. So things like local security on your machine, access control, network attacks, cryptography. You'll start learning a little bit of cryptography in foundations, and like threats, attacks, vulnerabilities. What's the difference between a threat and a vulnerability, for example? Then you will get into something called virtualization and Linux. So in terms of virtualization, you'll actually install your first virtual machine using something called Kali Linux, which is the most commonly used distribution of Linux for offensive security, and some other things as well. And then you get into a little bit of Python. So we're not going real deep into Python in foundations. It's just some very high level concepts. So programming basics, data types, control flow, functions, if-then statements, those kinds of things. And the reason Python is taught in this program is because it can be used in cybersecurity work to automate routine tasks. So we do start teaching a little bit of Python. So one thing you'll see here is tools you'll learn. And I just want to highlight here that this program is very hands-on, and we're teaching the most state-of-the-art tools that employers are asking us to train our students so that when they graduate, they're employable, they're hireable by the companies. So for example, like I mentioned before, you're going to, even in foundations, you're already going to be working in the command line. You're going to be using something called a hypervisor with a tool called VirtualBox. You're going to get into Kali Linux and do some basic Python. So tools you'll learn is an important theme as you go through the boot camp. Okay, I'll zoom back out here again. And you can see at a high level, once you graduate from foundations, there is a checkpoint here, and you do need to pass the foundations checkpoint to move into the boot camp. Now, if you don't pass foundations, that's okay. Most of our students do, but if you don't, that's okay. You can what we call replay foundations and then join the next available cohort. So assuming you pass foundations, then you'll move into the boot camp. This is the 13-week on-campus program. And you can see at a high level here that certain parts of the curriculum are red and certain parts of the curriculum are blue. Because in InfoSec, we have this notion of red team versus blue team. So red team is offense and blue team is defense. And we teach red team first because what you want to do is develop something called the security mindset, right? If you want to be a good defender, you have to know how to be an attacker and how to defend against those attacks. So even though in InfoSec, most of the jobs are on the blue team on defense, which makes sense if you think about it, we teach red team first because it'll make you a better blue teamer, okay? And help you build that security mindset. So before we get into red team though, we're gonna teach you some more essential concepts. So the first 2 weeks in the boot camp are gonna be what we call security essentials, where you'll go deeper into the command line, networking, and Python, and you'll get started with scripting with something called Bash. So you can see some of those here, and you'll be working in the command line, by the way, in Linux and Windows while you're in the program. And then you'll go deeper into networking, more practical hands-on networking, not learning everything you need to know about networking, but just the subset of things that you need to know to be successful in cybersecurity. And then you'll also go deeper into Python. Again, not all of Python, just Python that's related to security. And you can see some concepts here, which may sound like jargon at this point, and that's okay. But these are the types of things you'll be learning in security essentials. And again, here are the specific tools you'll be learning in this phase. Again, if it looks like jargon, that's okay. But just the headline here is that you're learning a bunch of very specific cybersecurity related tools. Okay, so zooming back out, we are now about to go into the red team training, right? And so as you can see, let me zoom back out here again. One of the lines here, it says training to be a, and during the red team phase, you're training to be a penetration tester. And during the blue team phase, you're training to be a security analyst. So penetration tester, what is a penetration tester? Another word for it is ethical hacker. And so there's different types of ethical hackers. Sometimes penetration testers work for a large company who may want to penetration test themselves, right? Try and break into their own systems and see where vulnerabilities are so they can patch them. Oftentimes, large companies will hire a pen testing firm for an engagement. Here's a month-long project, try and break into this part of our business, this web app or this facility or whatever it may be. So penetration testing is ethical hacking. And what you're going to do here in the red team phase is you're going to learn advanced ethical hacking skills by working through Offensive Security's penetration testing with Kali Linux, the official prep course for the OSCP exam. Now, there's a lot in there. Let me unpack what I just said. Okay, so first of all, Offensive Security. So if you're not familiar with a company called Offensive Security, they're very respected in cybersecurity. They run the Kali Linux project, and they also run the OSCP exam. And if you're not familiar with the OSCP exam, it's kind of like if you've ever heard of the Tough Mudder race where you have to run like a marathon, but you have to jump over things and dive into water and climb over stuff. It's a grueling sort of marathon. The OSCP exam is similar in its gruelingness. That's not a word, is it? It's similarly grueling. Okay, so for example, it is a 24-hour exam. So let me just let that sink in for a second. 24-hour exam where you have to hack into 5 different boxes, 5 different computers, and you either can or you can't, right? You can't fake your way through the OSCP exam. And so people who have the OSCP certification, who pass the exam, they're almost like the for lack of a better analogy, they're sort of like the Navy SEALs of red teamers. So we're actually training for the OSCP exam in the red team part of the program. So you're going to do things first. You're going to do what we call recon, active and passive recon. So you want to know your target. Then you're going to want to assess your target. So do things like vulnerability scanning. These are all digital tools. Look at common protocols. Do some recon assessment. And then once you've done your recon, you're going to want to exploit your targets. So try and get a shell on that machine and deploy a payload. So then you have a foothold. Then you're going to want to get something called persistence. So you can stay in that machine, you can leave, and then you can come back. So and then once you do that, you're going to want to do something called priv-esc, or escalate your privileges. So you can get admin on that machine, and you can do whatever you need to do on that machine. And then at the end of the red team phase, there's a red team hackathon. And then there's team presentations for each team talks about one of the boxes that they broke into. And again, you can see the set of tools that you'll be learning. Actually, there's many more in red team, but you can see some of them here that are shown here. So now, once you finish red team phase, we get into what we call async week. It's probably better to call it cert week. In fact, we should start calling it cert week. But essentially what's happening during week 7 is you're working from home at your own pace. Now, you won't have instructional support this week, as you will be taking one of the certification tracks shown below. So let's see what's down here. Whoops. Okay. Oops. Okay, here we are. Okay, so let's talk about certifications. So in cybersecurity, unlike in coding or web development, certifications are a thing in cybersecurity, and there's no shortage of debate as to whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. What I would say is that, generally speaking, for people who are looking to break into this field, it's a good thing, because It's an opportunity for you to earn these certifications. Even if you don't have years of experience, if you earn the certifications, then you can prove to employers that you have the skills they need, so you can hit the ground running on their team. So I think generally speaking, for where you're at in terms of beginning your journey, certs are a good thing. Now, as you go through this program, you are going to form your own opinion about if career-wise you want to be working on the red team or the blue team. That if you try to answer that question now, you probably wouldn't be able to, just because you don't have the information, you haven't dabbled in the red team. But as you get closer to Cert Week, you will be able to make a decision if you want to continue going down the red team track or the blue team track. So if you want to go down the red team track, then during Cert Week, we're actually going to recommend you sit for the OSCP exam because you've just learned all of the, you've been practicing a bunch of the boxes, you've gone through the official training program for OSCP, so why not? Now I will say almost no one passes the OSCP the first time they take it. Almost no one. Although we did have in our last cohort, we had someone who passed on their first attempt. So here, it's not about earning this OSCP during week 7. Think of it more like doing your first attempt, so you get a feel for the experience. And then after you finish the program, if you still are committed to working on the red team, then you can do that second attempt for the OSCP and try and earn it. Now, since relatively few of the jobs are on red team, most of our students elect not to do OSCP. Actually, I have a larger number of students who take OSCP than I would have predicted. It's been about 30%, actually 30 to 40%. But anyway, the alternative, if you don't want to sit for the OSCP, and the OSCP is not for everyone, it's a 24-hour exam is not for everyone. So a lot of our students go on the blue team track if they're committed to working on the blue team. And here we'll recommend that you take an entry-level certification called Security Plus. Now, emphasis on entry level, right? It's a multiple choice exam. You do have to, have some knowledge, but it's nowhere near as difficult as the OSCP, for example. But what's interesting about the Security Plus cert is it is the most widely recognized entry level blue team cert out there. And if you have Security Plus on your resume, it helps you get through those HR filters, and you're more likely to get your resume looked at when you're submitting it to employers. So if you want to be on the blue team track, which you'll know around this time, you'll take Security Plus during Cert Week. And by the way, for OSCP, since we're partnered with Offensive Security and we're teaching the official PWK class, penetration testing with Kali Linux, the attempt for OSCP is included in the cost of the tuition. Okay, let's zoom back out here. So now you've just finished your red team training. You've developed that security mindset. You can think like an attacker. So now it's time to start learning blue team and training to be a security analyst. So in this part of the boot camp, it's less technical, slightly, it's still technical, and more about storytelling, right? So you'll work through various scenarios and simulations that will be similar to what you'll encounter in the real world as a blue teamer at a large company. So we're teaching something called the NIST cybersecurity framework. Again, sort of beginning with and ending in mind, what do employers here in New York City want people to know? NIST is a widely recognized framework for cybersecurity, and it covers things like identify threats, protect against them, detect them, how do you respond, so incident response, and then how do you recover from them. So there are all sorts of different scenarios that you'll work through in the blue team phase. And so by the time you get through blue team, again, you're learning a number of tools, sort of all the key aspects of working on the blue team within the context of the NIST cybersecurity framework. Now, when you finish blue team phase, let's go back down to the bottom. You're going to take an exam for a certification called CISA, Cybersecurity Analyst. Now, it is required to take the exam in week 12, but like it says here, having your CISA certification will make it easier / faster to get hired as a security analyst. So you are required to take the CISA exam in week 12 when you have learned all the material. If you don't pass the test, you can opt to try again in flight. Each time you take the exam, CompTIA will charge you $348. So these certification exams, you don't take them here at Fullstack. You go to a certified testing center a CompTIA testing center, and you take the exam. So CISA, the CISA exam you take at the end of week 11. Actually, I need to update this. It says week 12, but it's at the end of week 11. Okay, so now you finished your red team and your blue team training. And so then you get into week 12, which is projects week. So for any given cohort, some of this can vary a little bit, based on feedback from the previous cohort. We iterate on the curriculum constantly, but these are the broad strokes, okay? But if it changes for your particular cohort, that's just the iteration of the curriculum. But you can assume you'll be doing, first of all, what we call SOC battle. So SOC is the Security Operations Center, which typically a lot of security people work in a SOC. So you work in a SOC battle, simulated SOC battle, where you'll pull together everything you've learned in the blue team and red team training and fight an epic battle against other students in our cyber range. And then you'll build what we call a capstone project, where you'll write a presentation on a modern vulnerability and demo a proof, something called a proof of concept, to demonstrate something that you've learned. So what's interesting about going into this field is it's such a broad field. You've just kind of seen it, how many topics you'll cover in this in the course poster. And so as you get exposed to different tools, technologies, and procedures, TTPs, you will inevitably gravitate to some more than others. Like, oh, you really love that one, and that one not so much. But whatever captures your imagination and you're most excited about, and also is sort of in line with your career goals, you'll decide to do a capstone project in that area. Okay, and then the following week we call launch week. So you'll work from home this week and come to the Global Cyber Center, which is in Chelsea. It's something part of something called Cyber NYC, which I'll talk about shortly. But you'll come to the Global Cyber in Chelsea for a couple events. First of all is launch day. So on the Tuesday morning, you'll get on stage to present your capstone project in front of a live audience. The event is live streamed on YouTube for employers to watch. Now, technically anybody can watch it, but it's really for employers who are coming to hiring day, so they can watch you on stage speaking articulately about your capstone project and about cybersecurity related technical topics. Because 3 days later, we have something called hiring day. So on the Friday morning, you will attend hiring day, which is a speed round of hiring interviews with employers in New York City. Now, hiring day, what doesn't happen on hiring day is you have a 10-minute interview and you get a job offer, right? Rather, what we're doing is it's a first interview with each of the companies that you interview with. And then hopefully you will continue that conversation directly with them and their HR team about joining their organization. Okay, so that's launch week, and this is when you graduate from the program. Then you go into flight, which we talked about earlier, which is where you'll work from home during flight at your own pace. And as I mentioned, you'll spend about 50% of your time doing job search and 50% of your time studying to take an advanced certification, right? So here, what we recommend, it depends on your track, right? So if you're working on the blue team track and you want to get hired as a defender, we're going to recommend you study for and try and earn a certification called the CISSP. So the CISSP, if you haven't heard of that, it's by far the most widely recognized advanced blue team security certification. So definitely the most recognized, the sort of standard advanced blue team cert. The challenge with it is that you have to have 5 years of experience to get the CISSP. But there's a little hack you can do, okay? You can take the CISSP exam, and if you pass it, they'll give you something called the CISSP Associate Designation, which basically means you've passed the CISSP, pending 5 years of experience, you'll get the CISSP. In the meantime, you get the CISSP Associate. So it sends a great message to employers about the skills that you have. Or if you love red team stuff and you want to be a pen tester, then we'll recommend you do your second attempt at the OSCP while you're in flight. So continue to study advanced learning as you're in flight. So then you graduate and you're launching your cybersecurity career, right? So we just looked at the numbers of 3 million open jobs now. We looked at where they are. We looked at the trend line for that number getting even bigger. And then we looked at the average starting salary as well here in New York City. So that is the course poster for Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp. And this journey that you see here is actually, it's one of the things we get often before people see the course poster. It's the most common question: where do I even go? Where do I begin? How do I get there? So this visualization, this infographic is answering those questions. Okay, so let me go back into the slides. So that's the course poster, and that's a deep dive into the curriculum. Now, obviously, you know, I've used the phrase begin with an ending in mind. The ending is getting hired, and so you won't be surprised to hear that we do quite a bit of career development work with you while you're in the program. So I'll just read this part out here. At Fullstack, we believe knowing how to get a job is as important as knowing how to do a job. So while our instructors are hard at work building your technical skills, our career success team will be making sure you graduate totally ready for the job search. And even after you graduate, our career counselors will be there to keep you motivated, prepare you for interviews, and even negotiate offers. So here are the types of things you'll work with our career success team on. Building your technical resume. So a technical resume that's optimized for a cybersecurity person. Again, optimize your LinkedIn. Network within the industry, and this is a really important aspect. You know, when you come to Fullstack, you're sort of joining our community of learners, our community of alumni, and we network extensively within the industry. It's especially in cybersecurity. It's really a really important part of the equation, and I actually talk quite a bit about that in the Hacking 101 course. Prepare for your behavioral interviews and also technical interviews. Stay motivated on the job search. Craft your cover letters. Correspond with recruiters and negotiate offers. So headline here is you'll be spending quite a bit of time with the career success team, particularly towards the end of the program and in flight. Now, here's another infographic. This is a summary of what we just looked at on the course poster. Okay, the full-time program, 17 weeks, Analyst and Penetration Tester Bootcamp. You can see week by week what you're learning and the different cert tracks here as well. Now, we have had a number of people ask us if we have a part-time version of the program available. And the answer is yes, we do. We're about to have our first part-time cohort based on demand. And so that is the part-time version of our program. So if you have a job and you can't quit to do a full-time bootcamp, then you may want to look at the part-time bootcamp, which is 26 weeks, and it's an analyst bootcamp. And I just want to spend a moment sort of comparing and contrasting the full-time and the part-time programs. So the main difference is in red team training, okay? So you can see in the part-time program, it doesn't say penetration tester bootcamp. This is strictly focused on becoming a security analyst. So you're not going as deep into the red team. So you're spending a total of 48 hours instead of a total of 192 hours that you're spending on red team in the full-time program. And so when you graduate, you know, you go through the weeks, 26 weeks, and you have your project weeks at the end, but the end goal is to get hired as a security analyst. Now, I do sometimes get asked, how should I choose? You know, what if I don't know if I like the red team stuff and if I want to go down that career path? And I think in terms of now, where you're at, the way to choose is if you have a job, then keep your job and look at the part-time program, because what you can do is, even if you think you may love the red team stuff, or you get halfway through and you realize, oh man, I really do love the red team stuff, then you can always circle back after you graduate and go and take PWK, Penetration Testing with Kali Linux. You know, the course is available online. It's $800. Anybody can sign up and subscribe and have the practice set of labs to work through. The $800 cost is included in the cost of tuition in the red team phase. It's not included in the red team phase for part-time program, but again, you can always circle back. If you like your exposure here to red team, you can always circle back after you graduate from the program and sign up for Offensive Security's online course to do PWK. So those are the main differences between the full-time and the part-time program. Now let's look at the costs for the program. Let's look at full-time first. So first, the prep course, Hacking 101, as I mentioned, is a free course. The tuition for the full-time bootcamp, $17,610. There are a couple other related expenses. So you will need a laptop with at least 16 gigs of RAM, because you're running a bunch of different virtual machines. So you need a bunch of on your laptop. So you need a bunch of RAM. If you already have a MacBook with 16 gigs RAM, great. If you don't and you need to buy a laptop, then I would recommend not buying a MacBook, because if you want a MacBook with 16 gigs RAM, it's going to cost you about $2,500. It's much better to get a Windows laptop, where you can quite easily get a brand new laptop for in the $600 range, a brand new Windows laptop. It doesn't matter. You can go through the program on Windows or Mac laptop, because you're just running virtual machines on each one anyway. But if you just, for example, if you need to get a laptop, you can go to newegg.com and search for the laptops, filter with laptops with 16 gigs, and then sort by lowest price. And you'll always see a number of different brands in the $500 to $700 range. So assume it's about $600 for your laptop if you need one. And then there's a $400 course fee, which covers the cost of program materials and one voucher for the CISA exam, which gives you this total here. Now, other optional certifications, OSC CP attempt number 1, if you do that, like I mentioned, it's included in the tuition. CompTIA Security Plus, if you do that, and Cert Week, that's $339 from CompTIA. And if you take the CISSP in flight, it's about $700 that CISSP will charge you. Now, when you look at the cost for the part-time program, a lot of these line items are the same. The tuition is slightly lower. And so your total cost here is going to be about $17,000. Now, one thing that I would recommend is, if you say, all right, let's look at this number. You're looking at the full-time program. Is that a good cost? Is that a good investment? And what I would recommend, sort of the framework I would recommend you look at this in, is in terms of the ROI, right? As a matter of fact, whenever you're looking at any educational investment, look at the ROI. So you're going to spend this much, and what is the expected outcome? So here you're going to spend this much, and the target outcome is to get an entry-level salary of around $85,000. So that's how I would sort of weigh the ROI and sort of the calculus here. And also the fact that you're going into a job market with a lot of demand. Okay. Now, in terms of financing this tuition, we do have financing available by something called Skills Fund. If you're not familiar with Skills Fund, they work with boot camps like us to finance the education for the students. So they'll basically pay your tuition and convert it into a loan. So for this amount, it comes out to about $400 a month for 5 years. A lot of our students choose to start payments 3 months after graduation to give yourselves time to get through flight and get hired, get your new income coming in, so then you can pay off the loan. And you can also include something called the cost of living allowance in your loan. So while you're in the boot camp, if you need to pay your rent or pay for groceries, or pay for your laptop, then you can add up to $6,500 in a cost of living allowance into your loan. So most of our students actually do use Skills Fund to finance their tuition. Okay, next available cohort dates. The next available part-time cohort, the application deadline is actually a week from today, and the program starts on February 4th. And then the next cyber full-time cohort application deadline is March 9th, and foundation starts on March 23rd. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the White Hat Manifesto, which I mentioned before. So this is something we ask our students to sign, as I mentioned, before they start the boot camp. And it's a very simple document. As a hacker, there are things that I will do and I won't do. So things I will do: be honorable, be respectful, be reliable, treat people fairly and with respect, respect people's privacy and the privacy of organizations that I work for, keep my skills and knowledge current through lifelong learning, be active in the InfoSec community and give back, build projects and be willing to share what I learn, submit only original and authentic work, and inspire and support aspiring hackers that come behind me. Now, things I won't do: be an asshole, be dishonest, be deceitful, do things that are illegal, make any misleading or false representations to my peers, raise any unnecessary alarm, or sadly, given the current state of affairs, give unwarranted comfort, disclose any confidential information without the specific consent of the owner, and work in InfoSec just for the money. If anybody's curious why this is here, it's basically, yes, people tend to get paid well in InfoSec. However, if you're going into this field just for the money, that's really not a good recipe for success. You only want to go into this field because you're really into it, and you want to do something positive for the world. And then we sum it up down here. I will do what I can to help make the world a safer place. I promise to only hack hardware, software, and/or networks in ways that are consistent with the values above. In resolving any conflicts, I will first consider public safety, then duties to individuals, then duties to the profession. So we'll ask you to sign that before you start in the program, after you complete foundations. So I think my AirPods are telling me their battery's low, but we'll see how we do here. Cyber NYC, I mentioned this briefly before. If you haven't heard of Cyber NYC, it's a $100 million investment that New York City is making to essentially try and turn New York City into like, you can think of it as like the Silicon Valley of cyber. And there's different aspects to this project, but one of them, so there's a number of different partners that are involved. For example, one of the aspects is the official cybersecurity bootcamp, which is Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp. I'm not going to go into all the details of the other aspects of it, but you can definitely go to cyber-nyc.com to learn more about it. And there are other, we're the official bootcamp. There's also other universities involved. So Columbia, Cornell, NYU are involved, and a number of different organizations as well. So I definitely invite you to check out Cyber NYC to learn more about it. As a matter of fact, you can go onto our website, cyber.fullstackacademy.com, and you click on the press button, and you'll see a lot of press coverage that Cyber NYC has received. So for example, the New York Times plans to turn New York into a capital of cybersecurity. TechCrunch, New York City wants to build a cyber army. So lots of good articles here. Definitely recommend you check those out. Now, since this is part of Cyber NYC, which is the government, right? New York City Economic Development Corporation, there's also politicians involved in supporting this mission, right? So here's a message from Paul Vallone, City Councilman Paul Vallone, where he said, in this 21st century era, continuously finding new and innovative ways to rise and meet the challenges that cybersecurity threats present to society is critical. Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp will train, certify, and prepare New York City's next generation of cybersecurity professionals and launch them into highly in-demand and vital cybersecurity careers, making our city more prepared to inventively face the challenges of tomorrow. And here's a quote from James Patchett, the president of the Economic Development Corporation, where he says, EDC is proud to support the launch of Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp. The rapid rise of cybersecurity has created vast opportunities and in-demand jobs within the industry. Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp promises to train students of today to fill the jobs of tomorrow in this burgeoning sector. So James is talking about the launch of Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp. So it's brand new, right? So it launched in July of this year, and we've had our first cohort go through. We saw some amazing statistics. For example, 91% of the students passed the CISA exam on the first attempt. The second cohort's about to graduate. The third cohort is about to start, and that one is, and they were all sold out. We've had more demand than we have seats available in the program. So it's a brand new program, but we're working closely with New York City, and there's a lot of people who are excited about the possibilities here. So try and start summing things up here. In this talk, we talked about the big picture, what's happening in cyberspace. We talked about why it's creating an opportunity for people in this space. And then we gave an overview of the program, and we did a deep dive. So let's talk about next steps. If you want to get started, what is it they say? Every great journey begins with a single step. I guess your first step was coming to this info session. So let's consider your second step. Anyway, it's taking Hacking 101. That's all. Just to focus on the one next step. And the way you do that is just go to cyber.fullstackacademy.com, click on the prepare button, and then click on Hacking 101. And then you just give your email and you can get started right away. And then after taking Hacking 101, if a couple things have happened, right? So if the world of cyber has captured your imagination and you think this would be a fun career path, like you're into it, right? With a good income potential, then I would encourage you to apply to get into the bootcamp. So that's the talk, and I wanted to open it up to Q&A at this point. So if you have any questions, then just please go ahead and post them in the chat. All right, hopefully you can see the chat in Zoom. I should have remembered to encourage you to post your questions as we go through in chat. Any questions? Okay, we have a question from Helen. How does the technology component work? Do you need access to Linux OS, for example? So yeah, that's what I was talking about before in terms of virtualization, right? And running virtual machines. So as part of the program, whether you have a MacBook or a Windows laptop, you'll install a hypervisor, something called a hypervisor. We use an open source hypervisor called VirtualBox. So you'll install that, we'll show you how to use it. And then within VirtualBox, you will install a bunch of different virtual machines. Some are Linux and some are Windows. So you will work very closely. You'll spend a lot of time working on Linux and a lot of time working on Windows. From Giovanna, did my questions show? No, well, this one did, but I didn't see another question if you posted it. Okay, any other questions? Okay, from Giovanna, what's the difference between the New York Fellowship and the Cyber Camp? Okay, so the New York Fellowship, so the difference between the coding school and the cybersecurity school. In the coding school, there's a program called the New York City Web Development Fellowship, which is another program that we run for New York City. It's not related to cyber, but you can definitely check it out. It is a free tuition program for low income New Yorkers. So if you want to learn more about the Web Development Fellowship, the New York Web Development Fellowship, just go to fullstackacademy.com and you'll see it in the list of programs and you'll be able to click on it and read more about that program. And by the way, you know, sometimes I get asked, should I choose cyber or coding? And for that, I would just simply say they're both great options, right? I would just, you know, and they're different, right? So with coding, you know, one interesting thing about learning how to code is that once you learn how to code, then you can sort of build anything that your mind dreams up. It's kind of like a superpower, right? And that's great. And there's a lot of jobs in coding. Cybersecurity is different. First of all, there's a lot more jobs in cybersecurity. And it's also kind of like a mission. Like if you see all these threats, you read the news every day and you feel like there's a lot of risk in cyberspace and you want to help out. So it's kind of like a mission-oriented line of work, and you get, I guess, what's the expression? Psychic income is what they call it. You feel good about the line of work that you're doing. But either one, coding or cybersecurity, are great career choices. Any other questions? What if you don't make it through the admissions process? Well, the admissions process, I think generally what happens is if you don't make it through the admissions process and you're really committed to getting into the program, then we can give you a list of resources to train on, some basic entry-level networking concepts that you can train on, and then you can reapply 6 months later. Any other questions? Okay, question from Alexandra. Can you tell us more about the teachers and their qualifications? Yeah, so I like this question. Yeah, this is one of the most important aspects of coming to Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp is the instructors that you'll be working under. So for example, our lead Blue Team instructor we hired from Google. He was helping to run Blue Team at Google, and he moved from San Francisco here to New York. And so you'll be studying under him. His name is Veer. Red Team instruction is led by an instructor named Corey. He used to be one of the most beloved instructors on the coding side of Fullstack, but then he moved into cybersecurity. He's got an OSCP, and he's an incredibly charismatic instructor. You will love working under both. You will love studying under Corey and Veer and the other instructional staff as well. So the way it's kind of broken down is you have a whole team of people that are sort of supporting you as you go through the bootcamp. So you have your main instructors for red team and blue team phase. You also have what we call teaching assistants, and there's one teaching assistant for every 7 students. And so teaching assistants. So when you are in class and you're working on a project, if you get stuck, you can put in what we call a help ticket just in our learning management system. You submit a question, a teaching assistant will walk over to your desk and help you work through that problem. You will also have a dedicated career success coach, and we've got a program lead. So there's sort of a whole team of people supporting the students in the program. The academics are obviously the most important, and you'll be working under some of the best. And as a matter of fact, the curriculum design, so what I just showed you in the course poster, it's kind of unique to go into a situation where you're learning red team and blue team. That's kind of one of the differentiators for this program. And our curriculum lead is a guy named Michael Cranch, and he used to teach red team. He's another OSCP. He used to teach red team at West Point, upstate, and he's still in that community. But we just pulled together almost like an Avengers style dream team of hackers to pull together our curriculum, to design the curriculum, and build the cyber labs that you'll be working through in the bootcamp. Okay, another question from Giovanna. Will the CompTIA A+ be necessary? So the A+ is not necessary. A+ is interesting in the sense that, A+ is when maybe you have Giovanna, maybe you have the A+, but for everyone else who may not know this certification, it's an entry-level computer certification. So you're learning about hard drives, you're learning about RAM, you're learning about operating systems. So it's definitely it's not bad to have, certainly. But generally, if you look at the entry-level CompTIA certs, you have your A+, you have your networking plus, and you have your security plus. So A+, we don't really teach much of that. Maybe we teach maybe 10% of the content from the A+ cert. In networking plus, but we don't ask students to take the cert. In networking plus, we teach about 50% of the material. That's in networking plus. And in security plus, we teach about 100% of the material that's in security plus. So A+ not necessary, but not bad to have. Another question, is there anything similar, free tuition, to the fellowship and/or internships offered for the cyber bootcamp? So there was, okay, so for the first 3 cohorts, you would be applying for the fourth cohort. For the first 3 cohorts, there was something called the Cyber NYC Bootcamp Scholarship. Unfortunately, those have all been taken. There may be some more scholarships in the future, although it won't be anytime soon. So as of now, the only way to finance tuition at the Cyber Bootcamp is with Skills Fund. Okay, I think that's all the questions. I'll just give it another second here to see if we have any last questions. All right, well, why don't we leave it there? I appreciate everyone coming and joining this talk during your lunch hour. I hope you found it a good use of time. If you want to learn more about the program, just go to cyber.fullstackacademy.com. And if your interest has been piqued so far, I definitely encourage you to check out Hacking 101. Okay, take care.